Cerquetti.
Only a few words. Thank you, Lucy. And I am very glad to be here in the monastic town of NEWNORCIA because it is my Australian point of reference. And I was here for the first time in August 77 when I met Abbot Bernard Bruni, at that time Abbot, and Father David Barrett. Before leaving Italy that year, I noted the name NORCIA on the map of Australia. NORCIA was very familiar to me in Italy because we used to spend summer a few kilometers from NORCIA. And Umbria region is the land of saints. Assisi, St. Francis, NORCIA, San Benedict, San Clare of Assisi, Santa Rita da Capra. Many saints. It's a fantastic region. And my first mystery play here, Jacopone da Todi, The Lament of the Virgin, was presented here just 21st August 77, so exactly 39 years ago. And I know this interesting place with its cultural and spirituality, NORCIA is. And this time, by agreement with Abbot John Herbert and with support from Abbot Bernard and Father David, we present what I proposed to them while on a visit last year as a contribution to this year of mercy. A sort of literally poetical, mystical journey through the masterpiece of European and world literature. I mean, the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. Alighieri was a noble family of Florence, but with the ancient Roman origin, actually. And the Divine Comedy, using selected cantos from this famous work of epic poetry, which is still significant for our present times. Let me make some brief preliminary remarks. First of all, today we are facing the extreme challenge, or as someone told me, of trying to bring sacred theatre back to its origin. After the fall of the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD and during the rise of monasticism, particularly in Italy, monasteries became a real fortress from a religious and cultural point of view. Monks were not only active as amanuenses, I mean, copying the ancient Greek and Roman treatises, whether philosophical, scientific, or theological, but they also staged presentation of the main gospel events, such as the Nativity or the Passion of Christ, for urban and rural people who were often illiterate, not only unable to read Latin, but unable to read at all. And so today, in some passages and cantos of the 3 parts of the Divine Comedy, I mean, Inferno, Hell, Purgatory, Paradise, we again have monks presenting sacred theatre in company with their Benedictine sisters and a couple of experienced actors and singers, Mary and Nicholas Creed. On my last observation, this year is the 4th centenary of the death of William Shakespeare, 1616, 2016. And before coming to NEWNORCIA, I staged a similar public reading performance based on Shakespeare's masterpiece, Hamlet. So this year I wanted to share the experience of 2 milestones of our Western culture. Hamlet is the high point of theater in all times, and Divine Comedy is the highest point of poetry and literature of all times. The two great epic performance of the Western civilization. And in facing this challenge, I am inspired by Michelangelo's statue of David in Florence. I think that many of you saw this statue. David's countenance is serene and confident as he gazes at his opponent, the giant Goliath. There is no hesitation, no self-doubt, just total confidence that with God's help he will be victorious in the single-handed combat. With like courage and trust, we today must devote ourselves to promoting the basic moral and spiritual values of our Christian faith. And those of us who are gifted artistically in this way can use mystery plays and literary masterpieces for this purpose. This is our initial speech for the Divine Comedy today. Okay. Now we start with the play. Please.
Dante's Divine Comedy is one of the few literary masterpieces to have survived from the Middle Ages, which is still relevant today and will be into the future. Widely read and studied in the original Italian and in numerous translations, in recent years it has even achieved the status of a bestseller. More than 6 centuries old, it was composed between 1305 and 1320, and can still exert its magic, still sway the thoughts of mankind. This is partly because the epic poem is so rich and varied that the reader can find something in it for himself. Dante was a fellow explorer of hell and heaven, it is true, yet an explorer who knew what it felt like to be lost in a dark and hostile forest, who understood the weariness and the exhilaration of hard climb. The Divine Comedy makes its impact on many different levels. There are stories from ancient and Greco-Roman times, from mythology, science, astronomy, philosophy, from the greats, such as Aristotle, Seneca, Cicero, the classic poetry of Homer, Horace, Ovid, and Lucan. With all this knowledge, Dante makes his own exploration of hell, purgatory, and heaven, accompanied by Virgil, the poet, celebrating the glory of the first Roman emperor who gave to Western civilization the advent of Jesus Christ. Then we meet Beatrice, his beloved guide in purgatory, and the turning point for his redemption as a human being. His personal redemption is an example to each of us. Incidental to this theme is the vivid picture Dante gives us of life and thought in a turbulent medieval Italy. And finally, on a far more universal plane, there is Dante's own compassionate examination of the human condition. The epic poem is also allegorical, for Dante's concern with man in general, the struggle between his basic instincts and his higher nature, the meaning of sin, of retribution and reward, the overwhelming power of love in bringing man to happiness. These are eternal themes to which we all respond. We can find ourselves, our friends, and our enemies in the pages of this epic work, performed for us today by the monks, sisters, and friends of NORCIA. From the point of view of Dante's troubled existence, one can say that he was no cloistered poet at all. In fact, the comedy was called divine a few years later by Giovanni Boccaccio.
I wanted to show you some photos to introduce you in Dante 65. And this is portrait on the wall of the campus. And this is the Henry. It's a focal point because Dante, after the struggles of political life, he, through the inspiration of this woman, he returned to the spiritual life. And he was ready to write the Divine Comedy, in which actually Beatrice, met at 10 years old, is the real protagonist of the entire Divine Comedy. Because Dante wrote Divine Comedy inspired on by Beatrice Cortinari.
At the midpoint of the path through life, I found myself lost in a wood so dark, the way ahead was blotted out. When I reached the foot of a high hill, I raised my eyes and saw its shoulders robed with the rays of the wandering light of heaven that leads all men aright on every road. And look, just where the steeper rise began, a leopard, light of foot and quick to lunge, all covered in a pelt of flecks and spots, who stood before my face and would not leave, but did so check me in the path I trod, I often turned to go the way I came. But hope was not so strong that I could stand bold when a lion stepped before my eyes. This one seemed to be coming straight for me, his head held high, his hunger hot with wrath, seemed to strike tremors in the very air.
A lion stepped before my eyes. This one seemed to be coming straight for me, his head held high.
Then a she-wolf, whose scrawniness seemed stuffed with all men's cravings, sluggish with desires, who made many live in wretchedness. So heavily she weighed my spirit down, pressing me by the terror of her glance, I lost all hope to gain the mountain top.
Then a she-wolf, whose scrawniness seemed stuffed with all men's cravings, sluggish with desires, who made many live in wretchedness. So heavily she weighed my spirit down, pressing me by the terror of her glance. I lost all hope to gain the mountain top.
Now, while I stumbled to the deepest wood, before my eyes appeared the form of one, the spirit of Virgil, who seemed hoarse, having held his words so long. When I saw him in that endless waste,
"Mercy upon me, mercy! What are you, a shade or man in truth?"
I was a man, and both my parents came from Lombardy, and Mantua they called their native land. In the last days of Julius I was born, and I lived in Rome under the good Augustus, in the time of the false and cheating gods. I was a poet, and I sang of how that just son of Anchises, Aeneas, came from Troy when her proud towers and walls were burnt to dust.
I was a poet, and I sang of that came from Troy when her proud towers were burnt to dust.
But you, Dante, why do you turn your back to such pain? Why don't you climb that hill that brings to light the origin and cause of every joy?
But you, Dante, why do you turn back to such pain? Why don't you climb that hill that brings to light the origin and cause of every joy?
And love that may be searched the volume of your work.
Honour and light of every poet.
He who will make her die in misery, not land, not lucre that he feed upon, but wisdom, love, and virtue shall be his meat, and by the cloth of felt he will be born.
He who will make her die in misery, not land, not lucre will he feed upon, but wisdom, love, and virtue shall be his meat, and by the cloth of felt he will be born.
He will bring health to humble Italy,
Who look upon the sorrowing souls of old, crying in torment for the second death.
Should you then wish to rise and go to them, another soul, Beatrice, will come, worthier than I. With her I leave you when I go on my way.
That I may flee this evil and the worst to come. Lead me now to the place you tell me of, so I may see St. Peter's Gate beyond purgatory, and those you say are dwelling in such misery.
To settle Dante's doubts about his worthiness to take the journey, Virgil tells of how Beatrice came down from heaven to beg for his help.
O muses of high genius, help me now.
See to my strength, make sure it will suffice before you trust me to so hard a road.
and she addressed me with an angel's voice, sweetly and softly.
Sweetly and soft
And she addressed
courteous soul of Mantua, rejoice, your fame lives on, exalted and complete, and will throughout the world from end to end, until the world ends. But I need you now. In a deserted hillside field, my friend Dante is fortune's enemy, and can't see how to make his way. Terror may turn him back. I'm not sure if he's not already dead, or if I've come in time to clear the track that in heaven I've heard said leads to salvation. So, if you would obey, go to him, and with all your verbal art, with whatever it takes, show him the way. Do this for me, for I am sick at heart. My name is Beatrice. Now you know your task. Where I come from and long to be restored, love rules me. It determines what I ask. When I am once again before my Lord, then I to him to whom all praise will praise you.
Why does it not worry you to descend to this centre of the world, from that vast realm you burn to see again?
A gentle lady in heaven, the Virgin Mary, was so moved with pity for that soul whose way was barred. Faithful follower now has need of you. I give him over to your loving care. St. Lucy, the foe of every cruelty, arose and hastened to the place where I sat beside Rachel of the ancient days.
No man was ever quicker in the world to seize his prophet or to flee his harm than I was when I heard the words she spoke.
Remember now your pedigree. You were not born to live as brutes. Virtue and knowledge are your guiding lights. I gave with these words such impulse to my crew for enterprise that I could not to save my life have held them back. We flew on oars like wings, our stern in that mad flight towards the morning, always left we bore. Stars of the other pole we saw at night, and ours so low that from the ocean floor it never once arose. 5 times the light had kindled, and the
Behold there, Dante, Satan.
Behold there, Satan.
Behold the place where you must arm yourself with fortitude.
The Emperor of the reign of misery, from his chest up emerges, from the ice of a dark lake.
But when I saw 3 faces in his head, how great a marvel it appeared to me.
Beneath each face extended 2 huge wings,
Large enough to suffice for such a bird.
I never saw a sail at sea so broad.
They had no feathers, but were black and scaled.
Like a bat's wings, and those he flapped and flapped.
With his 6 eyes he wept, and down 3 chins dribbled his tears and slather, slick with blood.
His feet stick out, and he is chewed head first.
Of the 2 others with their heads hung down, the one who hangs from the black snout is Brutus.
Brutus!
And Cassius the last.
Cassius.
But night is closing, is rising, and it's time to leave. For hell has nothing more for us to see now.
The stars.
The stars.
Truly I know that my sin is always before me. Against you alone have I sinned. What is it?
I want to explain the next canto by the location for the Campaldino in Tuscany. And this next, yes, this is the castle of Count Guidi, in which Dante was a guest. Just the day of the famous historical battle of Campaldino. Happened in the summer of 1289, and Dante took part in the historical battle. Campaldino is a vast plain between Arezzo and Florence, and the 2 opposing, this is the portrait of Dante just in front of the castle, where Dante had some studies in the library of this beautiful castle. And next, yes, and the other one, yes, and Dante was familiar with this castle of the Count Guidi. And in the great battle, the opposing armies were the Florentine Guelph pro-papal party with, like this, for instance, the Ghibellines were in red and white, instead of Dante Guelph.
No one forgets the royal Arno River rules us in a princely state,
Even because sustain it with greater art. We drew near, and I saw a gate.
We drew near, and I saw a gate.
3 steps leading from below of different colours.
And a warder who as yet spoke not a word.
And a warder who as yet spoke not a word.
His face was so bright I could not bear it.
His face was so bright I could not bear it.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek,
for they shall possess the land.
Theaterical.
I once saw at the beginning of the day, within a cloud of flowers, a lady appeared to me.
not been overcome with awe,
Trembling in her presence.
without having more knowledge by my eyes.
The hidden virtue that came from her filled all
Does
love.
not tremble.
I know the mind.
I sustained him with my countenance. Answer me. For the sad memories are not yet destroyed in you by the water.
Present things with their false pleasure turn like this as soon as your face was hid.
Nevertheless, in order that you may now bear the shame of your wandering, and another time, hearing your sirens, be stronger. Lay aside the sowing of tears and hearken.
Bit me at the heart, and I fell overcome.
Then when my cup was
Here, you shall be a little while a forester, and shall be with me. Everything you have seen will remain with you, and you will write of it when you have returned yonder to earth.
And I, who at her command was wholly bowed down and submissive, gave mind and eyes as she wished.
Pure and ready to mount to the stars.
Pure and ready to mount to the stars.
The moral world is imparted into the physical, into that universal concord of everything.
Those leaves of which the theme and you will make me worthy.
and crown myself then with those leaves of which the theme and you will make me worthy.
Beatrice stood with her eyes fixed only on the eternal wheels.
And this is the form that makes the universe resemble God. Here, the higher creatures see the impress of the eternal excellence, which is the end which that system itself is made. Pride, which so much moved you, and if you had heard and understood the prayers within it, why, you'd already know how the prelates will suffer a fate you'll see before you know its task too early or too late. Except as it might seem to him who, with desire or fear, awaits the blow, the promise kept.
That would accord with how he kept as lowly as he could.
They might not be faithful.
As to his brothers as his rightful heirs, he gave the keeping of his dear lady, and bade them love her as soon as